Good evening, Zimbabwe. This is the Women's Roundtable here on Studio 7 on Thursday, December the 10th, 2020, where we're broadcasting from home in Washington, D.C. because of COVID-19 or the coronavirus pandemic, which is currently ravaging the whole world, including Zimbabwe, where we've seen cases rising. So on this issue today, we're going to be speaking about the just ended 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. We're also talking about Human Rights Day, which falls today, which is the end of the campaign, and also other issues facing women, PJ.
Yeah. My name is Praxedis Jeremiah, and because of COVID-19, as Mavi said, we are broadcasting from home. I'm in Maryland, USA.
And I actually am Marvelous Mplanganya here because I've just had a program. I totally forgot to introduce myself. But anyway, we are actually very lucky today. We have two powerful women that are going to be joining us on the program to speak about the issue of human rights and also speak about this campaign, the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. So we will start off our program with Sisi Justina Mukoko, who's just agreed to join us for a few minutes so we can just look at the issue of this campaign. Tell us a little bit about this day, Ms. Mukoko. What does it mean for you?
International Human Rights Day is a very important day. And I think as Zimbabweans, it gives us an opportunity to take stock, to see where we are at. We are recognizing that there are a lot of deficits when we look at the respect for human rights. I think it's just today that I was seeing pictures and videos of Mary Chiwenga, the estranged wife of the vice president, who had been summoned to court to come and show the wounds that she has got. And for me, I think that is really abusing the rights of citizens, and it strips people of their dignity. And I think it's just a few days away that we had demolitions in Budiriro. It's raining cats and dogs in Zimbabwe, in most parts of the country. And it has been pouring in areas like Budiriro. I heard women sobbing, and one of them was actually saying, where do I take my 2-month-old baby in this weather? Even if they had built on land that they were not supposed to build on. Honestly, these houses were seen coming up. Couldn't they stop them before those houses were complete?
PJ.
Yeah, namhlanje uhlelo lethu sizaphatha indaba ezithile. Umkhankaso lo ophele namhlanje owe-16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Ulendingimba ethi Orange the World. Kumanyane njalo lelanga lokunanzwa kwelanga lamalungelo abantu, okulondolozwa kwamalungelo abantu, i-Human Rights Day namhlanje. Kube lezehlakalo ezithile ingcwethi ezibona ngokulondolozwa kwamalungelo abantu besithi eZimbabwe kube lokwephulwa kwamalungelo abantu okukhulu kakhulu kuzehlakalo oziqalisela kubhubhane lwe-COVID-19, ukubotshwa kwabantu, ukubotshwa kwabezombusazwe abaphikisayo, lokunye okunenginengi. Yikho-ke namhlanje sinxuse ingcwethi ezicubungula ezamalungelo abantu, ikakhulu abesifazane, njengoba sigqiba umkhankaso lo owe-16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Kulilanga njalo elimanyana lokuthi sinanza i-Human Rights Day. Kuyini okwenzakalayo Nkosazana Justina Mukoko khona ngapho?
PJ, ngifuna ukuthi ngithi thina umkhankaso we-16 days. Ngibona ingani khonokho ukuthi sithi 16 days. Kwenza ukuthi abantu bacabanga ukuthi kulesikhathi esivunyelwa ukuthi abesifazane babhekane lodlakela. Ngibona ingane okuqhakathekileyo ukuthi impilo yethu yonke kufanele sibe silawo umkhankaso wona, sihambe lawo throughout the year for 365 days. Singaze sagiba ngoba singagiba bakhona abacabanga ukuthi ku16 days lezi bengakaze nguthethise sengiyaqalisa ngoba sokugqijiwe. Hayi, asiqhubekeleni phambili, sinanza ilungelo labantu besifazane, sinanza ukuthi akufanelanga kube lodlame ezindlini, akufanelanga kube lodlame kwezinye indawo. Ukubeke kuhle ukuthi namhla lilanga lokuthi sinanze amalungelo oluntu, kodwa ilanga leli ngo-2020 libuya ngesikhathi sikhathazeka kakhulu PJ, ngoba unyaka ka-2020 awusiphanga okuhle okuphathelane lelungelo loluntu. Sibone ilungelo loluntu lisephulwa mahlayana, ikakhulu ngalabo abafanele bebe belondoloza ilungelo labantu. Ngikhuluma abebutho, ngikhuluma amapholisa, ngikhuluma abe-intelligence. Sikhangele kakhulu, sibona ukuthi ngesikhathi sitshelwa ukuthi kuza kuba le lockdown e-COVID-19, bekufanele ibe khona ngoba yikho ukuphendula okwenze amazwe onke omhlaba. Akuzange kube lesikhathi esaneleyo ukuthi abantu abaningi benelise ukuthi bathenge abangakudinga ukuthi babe lakho ezindlini. Esakubonayo ukuthi abantu bebefaka impilo yabo mahlayana nje, ukuthi abantu bebekutshela ukuthi ngingahlala ngikhaya ngiyakufa ngendlala, ngingaphuma ngiyakufa ngeCovid. So kuyafanana, yekela ngiphume ngiyokufa ngeCovid yakhona ngidingela abantwana ukudla. Sithe sesingene ku-lockdown bekulama checkpoints, indawo lapho bekulamapholisa, amasotsha belindele ukuthi babone abalencwadi ukuthi babavumele ukuthi bahambe. Kulezo ndawo sibone ilungelo loluntu lisephulwa kakhulu. Thina njengeZimbabwe Peace Project kuhlelo lwethu esikhangela khona ukwephulwa kwelungelo loluntu, sibone ukuthi amasotsha, amapholisa labe-intelligence babe yibo abathethe inkomishi yokwephula ilungelo loluntu. Bahambe phambi kweZANU-PF okwenyanga ezithile ngoba abantu bebesithi bafika kuma-checkpoints, amapholisa bebefika bahlukumezwe okunye okumangalisayo. Abesifazane kakhulu bebethi ngikhaya ukhangelane lodlame ngoba abantu bebengajayelanga ukuthi bahlale amahola amaningi kangako bebonke, ngoba sithi ekuseni lo phuma esiyale bephenduka ntambama abasela sikhathi esiningi sokuthi bahluphane. Indaba zodlakela oluphathe kakhulu abantu besifazane luqansile. Ukuthi benelisa ukuthi bayodinga uncedo bebengayenelisi ngoba thina njengama-NGO besingafakwanga kulabo abafanele benelisa ukuhamba kuthiwa yi-essential services. Sigcine sesilungisiswa ngokuya kwesikhathi, kodwa ku-lockdown yakuqala leya besingenelisi ukuthi sihambe. So kube lobunzima kakhulu, kwaba lokudubeka kakhulu kwezizalwane zeZimbabwe ngoba abanye bebekhangelane lokusilela kwamanzi, befanele baye ezibhoraneni ukuthi bayodinga amanzi, bekungela ama-sanitizer kulezo zibhorane, njalo bebeqeda amahola amaningi kakhulu bemelele ukuthi benelise ukuthatha amanzi. Abanye bebengena kudaba lokuthi sebebanjwa ngabafana akade bebuya bethatha amanzi ukuthi bahambe bayodengisa, bebadudulela khatshana ukuthi bengenelisi ukuthatha amanzi ngesikhathi esifaneleyo. Sibone njalo kusiba lokubotshwa okuningi kwamabandla aphikisayo ebesikubona ukuthi imithetho ibingasetshenziswa okufanayo. Besibona beZANU-PF bebuthana bebanengi, kodwa laba belinye icele abe-MDC Alliance ukuthi bazama ukubuthana bebehle babotshwa. Zikhona indaba eziningi kumthethwandaba khathesi bephendula indaba zonezo ukuthi bephule ama-lockdown regulations. So konke lokho sikubone kuyikuthi abantu bebehlukuluzwa kakhulu ngesikhathi soneso. Banengi abantu abakhangelela ukuthi u-2020 simkhangela ukuthi nanguyana uzehamba.
Yeah.
Tombobvunza ipapo muzvare mukoko zvii zvamuri kuona zviri kutarisana nemadzimai panguva ino yatiri kutaura yeHuman Rights Day uyezve nekupera kwe16 Days of Activism against Gender-Based Violence tichitarisa sangano renyu reZimbabwe Peace Project? Ndezvipi zvimwe zvamuri kuona zviri kutarisana nemadzimai?
Madzimai akatakura kurema zvikuru sei tikatarisa kana nyaya dzekuronga mhuri chaidzo nenyaya yecorruption. Mapiritsi chaiwo macontracectives aya haasi kuwanika kwavanga vachimbokwanisa kuawana, nekuti kune vari kuenda kuna atuta vochienda vonotengesa kumisika yakasiyana siyana nemari iri pamusoro. Kune vakatobata nhumbu vanga vasingafanire kunge vakazvitakura nekuda kwekushaya mapiritsi iwayo. Tikabvawo ipapo totarisa kana madzimai akuenda kunobatsirwa. Pane zuva rimwe chete pakaenda madzimai masere kuHarare Hospital kuti vanobatsirwa. Pakati pavo vari vasere, vanomwe vakadzokera kumba vasina vana. Iri igore ra2020 haasi 1916 wekuti tinganetseke kuti nyaya dzekubara muzvipatara dzingakonzere kuti pave nekurasikirwa kweupenyu. Izvozvo zvinoratidza kuti tine dambudziko hombe, nekuti chimwe changa chiri kunetsa madzimai achienda kunzvimbo dzavanofanira kuwana utano inyaya yekuti vashandi veutano vanga vari kutsutsumwa nekuda kwekuti vanga vasina mashandiro akanaka anoratidza kuti vari kuita basa nemazvo. Uyezve vanga vasiri kutambira mari dzakakwana. Tochitarisa kushomeka kwemvura, vana mai ndo vanga vachipedza maawa handingati vanga vachipedza, naizvozvi ndofunga ndichitaura kudai zvibhorani zvakawanda zvina ana amai vari mumutsetse vakamirira kuti vagone kuwana mvura. Asi mvura iyoyo iri kunetsa kuwana nekuti pane chikiribidi chiri kuitika. Kune vakomana vanouya nemaskania vozadza mabhaketsi vanoenda vachinotengesa. Ava vasina mari yekukwanisa kutenga mvura vanopedza maawa asingaverengeki kusvika kana kuma2 AM. Dzimwe nguva unowana kana vana vasikana vanenge vabva kuchikoro nekuti anenge achifunga kuti mangwana kusena anoita sei kana mumba musina mvura. Zvese izvozvo zvanetsa munhukadzi. Uye takaonawo kukwira kwenyaya dzemhirizhonga mudzimba kana kubatwa chibharo kwevanhukadzi. Asi dambudziko ranga riripo nderekuti vanga vasingakwanisi kuti vaende kuti vanowana rubatsiro, nekuti panguva yelockdown yekutanga iya ma-NGO tanga tisiri essential service. Saka zvaitonetsa kana kuti ugone kupfuura pamapurisa. Tochitarisa zvekare nyaya dzema-abductions, nyaya dzekushungurudzwa kwevanhu kana vabatwa nenyaya dzema-abductions. Kune madzimai akati kuti akasangana nazvo, vanosanganisira madzimai 3 echidiki vekuMDC vakapambwa vakaenda vakanoshungurudzwa pamwe chete nekubatwa zvisakarurama zvine chekuita nenhengo dzakavandika. Asi chiri kurwadza iye zvino ndechekuti vakunzi vakazvipamba vega vakazvishungurudza vega. Hanzi kwakaitwa tsvakurudzo iri kuratidza kuti vanonyepa. Asi inini ndinoti ko tsvakurudzo inogoitwa sei nevanhu vari kupomerwa mhosva. Tsvakurudzo yatsvagirwawo kavamwe vari kunze vasiri mukati umu, kuitira kuti tinzwe an independent view kuti zvakafamba sei. Iye zvino kana kuti vagone kutaura dambudziko ravo, vanobva vashandisirwa mamwe mashoko andisingagone kana kuti ndidzokorore inini nemuromo wangu. Asi inini semunhu akambopinda madzudzo iwayo, zvandiri kuona vachitsanangura zviri kuenderana nezvandakaona muna 2008. Handifungi kuti ndinga ndiri kutadza kuti ndiziye kuti pandakaabductwa inini papa nekubata kwemapurisa, zvisinei nekuti vakambotiwa havasi kuziva kuti ndiri kupi. Saka nyaya inyaya dziri kutishusha isusu sevanhukadzi. Tozobva totarisa kugoverwa kunoitwa tingati zvekudya kana zvimwe zvinoita zvakaita sembeu. Saizvozvi kune chirongwa chehurumende chepfumvudzi. Vakawanda vari kutadza kuwana zviri kubva mupfumvudza nekuda kwekuti dzimwe nguva anongofungidzirwa kuti anogona kunge ari kubato rinopikisa. Asi ikodzero iri mubumbiro remutemo kuti kana uri kuda kuti ubatane nebato rezvematongerwo enyika riri pamwoyo pako, wakasununguka kuita izvozvo. Asi vanhu vari kuzombunyikidzwa nenyaya iyoyo zvekuti havazowani zvavanenge vachifanira kunge vachiwana. Ende izvozvo zvinhu zvinotichungurudza zvakanyanya.
Maybe if you can just give us that in English before we also welcome our guest, Comfort Dondo, who works here in America with an organization called Pumulani. Maybe let's just welcome you, Ms. Dondo, to the program before we go back to Mujare Justina, because she has to go to another program. Tell us a little bit about yourself and also how you find yourself involved in working with women here in the United States and in Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on this platform with my big sister and activist, Justina Mukoko. So my name is Comfort Dondo. I am a young Zimbabwean based in the United States, not by choice, but by the ways things are going on back home. And so as we do as Zimbabweans, we find ways to survive where we are and thrive. And so in Minnesota, USA, where I'm based, I founded a nonprofit organization called Pumulani, Minnesota African Women Against Violence. And this organization is not only serving women in Zimbabwe, in Minnesota, but it's serving women, African-born women living in the US, but also in all of the diaspora. And I found myself in this work because there was a huge need that what my big sister just said earlier on around the violation of women's rights, the violation of human rights, and how that is causing women to disperse all over the world, and also causing women to end up being subjected to a lot of different kind of abuses, including sex trafficking, human trafficking, among other things, sexual assault. And so our organization is really working on getting global and serving women, especially Zimbabwean women that are all over the diaspora, just to make sure that they know what their rights are and that we provide resources for them as we are in this very crisis as a nation.
Coming back to you, Ms. Mukoko, because we know time is not on our side. If you can just give us in English, what's your take as we end the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and going into Human Rights Day, which is today, on the situation of women in Zimbabwe, and also what you suffered at the hands of the authorities in Zimbabwe previously?
We shouldn't actually be ending 16 days against gender-based violence. I think this needs to be a continuous campaign. We need to have this campaign 365 days of our lives. I think 2020 is a year, Marvelous, that a lot of Zimbabweans would really want to see go. Because people have faced so many challenges this year. Issues around COVID-19. I think we were getting used to the new normal. We had never experienced having the entire world being shut down. When borders were closed, a lot of Zimbabwean women depend on cross-border for them to make a living. And it meant that during that time, they couldn't provide for their families. And it meant that we were looking at a lot of families that were really struggling with making ends meet and providing a decent meal for their children. We also recognized that there was a rise in domestic violence. You know, when people are spending so many hours together, being used to probably the husband going that way and the wife going the other way. But this time people were spending hours together. Tempers were flaring and emotions were running high. And we recognized an upsurge in cases of domestic violence. But the same women could not access services because a lot of NGOs that they relied on were actually not essential service. So we were not able to move past the police checkpoints. And I think our greatest concern as well as civil society organizations is the violence that was perpetrated by security officers, especially those who manned the checkpoints and those who were also looking at whether people were following the curfew. Mm-hmm. We recognize that the police, the army, the intelligence actually overtook ZANU-PF as perpetrators of human rights violations. And this went on for several months in the research that we do on a monthly basis as the Zimbabwe Peace Project. And we have also really been worried about the scarcity of water, where we recognize that that burden falls squarely on women and girls. They are the majority that you will find queuing at boreholes. Mm-hmm. We have seen that there are young men who have now seen an opportunity of a business venture where they move around with those Scanias of theirs with a lot of buckets of water. And when they get to a borehole, they literally push their way through, whether they are pushing a woman or a young girl, where there are also risks of those young girls in the dark being raped. And, you know, when lockdown started, the first one, a lot of people really did not heed the call to stay at home because they were saying, if I stay at home, I don't have food. So if I stay at home, I'll still die. You are saying if I go out, I die. So kwese kufa. And they were saying, well, we are going to go into these queues and queue for meal. But we also saw a lot of violations of people's rights, especially political rights, because we saw selective application of the law. We would see ZANU-PF gathering freely without any repercussions in terms of them, what can I say, bending the lockdown regulations. Mm-hmm. But those from the opposition, if they tried to do the same, they would actually be arrested. There are so many cases that are at the courts at the moment. And I think this was also the period where we saw also a difference in terms of how people looked at differently when it comes to the courts. You would find that you are aware that the Minister of Health was fired for corruption, but we have not seen him go to court. He hasn't been to Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison. When he appeared in court, we never saw him in leg irons and handcuffs. But we have seen people who have spoken against corruption actually suffering that. And I think we have also been worried about issues of abductions in 2020. Especially, I think we are all aware of the abduction of the 3 MDC young leaders. I'm not sure if I will still be able to talk about abductions in the next few months because there are laws that are actually being promulgated to criminalize talking about abductions. But I think for me, my bone of contention is there is no way that anyone who is implicated can investigate the same issue. Mm-hmm. Have moved up to the United Nations. They have got a special rapporteur on enforced disappearances and torture. The African Union itself also has special rapporteurs. Why did we not invite them in to come and do a proper investigation in this abduction? I think what is said is that you suffer that trauma and then it is it's rubbed in when you are told that you are lying and yet you have gone through all this pain. I think for someone who has experienced the same, I just imagine how I would have felt if someone was going to stand there. After all the suffering that I went through, someone then says, you have given us falsehoods. You were never abducted. You abducted yourself.
Very touching there. I'm not sure how much time you're still giving us because we also wanted you to weigh in on the US election where we've seen a number of women being, appointed in this new incoming government by Mr. Joe Biden of the Democrats before you leave, because you've been here, you've met the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, you've met Mike Clinton. What's your view on what's happening here in the United States?
I think the last time that I was in the US, I actually had tea with Dr. Biden at her house. And I also interacted with President-elect Joe Biden at the State Department. I think when we saw the array of women and all the work that they did in terms of mobilization, in terms of campaigning, and the way that Kamala Harris has actually been elevated to make history in the US. She hasn't just done that for herself. I think she has done it for a lot of women. All of us see that, the glass ceilings can actually be broken and we can find ourselves in the right corridors and actually serving our nations.
PJ.
Yeah, ungakahambi Nkosazana Justina ungasichasisela ngezehlakalo ezisanda kwenzakala ngathi ngekunyanga ezedluleyo zokwephulwa kwelungelo labantu ozichasise embikweni eliukhiphileyo lina njengenhlanganiso ye-ZPP. Izehlakalo ezabo Mary Chiwenga, izehlakalo zokuthunjwa kwabo Joanna Mamombe, izehlakalo zokudilizelwa izindlu emzini weBudiriro.
Into ebuhlungu kakhulu PJ, ikakhulu nxa uyazi ngilalele omama bekhala beBudiriro. Izulu liyana eHarare and endaweni eziningi zelizwe. So ukuthi ucabanga ukuthi umuntu olabantwana, lo muntu olomntwana olenyanga ezimbili uza kwenza njani ngemva kokubhidlizelwa indlu. Nxa ukhangele indlu isime lapha ngamandla amaningi lokuzincicha okuningi konke osokubhidlikile. Uyazi ngidabuke kakhulu ngilalele omama laba. Mina ngithi loba ngabe beakhe endaweni engavunyelwayo, abaningi basuka lapha abade behlala khona besiyahlala kuma-cabin. Indaba bengabalandanga beku-cabin ukuthi babakhiphe beku-cabin kungakaqali ukuthi indlu isilakho konke bebe sebebuya bebhidlisa. Lokhu kungikhumbuza umnyaka ka-2005 i-operation eMrambachina. Abantu babhidlizelwa izindlu phakathi kwenyanga zikaMeyi loJuni. Uyakwazi ukuthi yizo inyanga ezigodola kakhulu. Kulabantu abafelwa ngabantwana ngoba bebengela ndawo yokuya sebekhitshwe ezindlini akade bekuzo. Bese sikhangela njalo ukuthunjwa kwabantu bekusenzakala ku-2020. Mina njengomuntu owahamba ngendlela efanayo ngo-2008, Nxa ngilalele amankazana la ekhuluma ngalokho abahlangana lakho, kunengi engikubona kuhambelana lokwenzakala kimi. Angiboni kuyikuthi umuntu angenelisa ukuthi azithumbe, azihlukuluze, azibambe izitho zomzimba ezifihlekileyo. Angiboni kusenzakala. Mina njengomuntu osebenza kundaba zelungelo loluntu, mina ukukhala kwami ukuthi asingeke sithi abantu okuthiwa yibo abakwenzayo babe yibo abahluza lolu daba. Siphila phakathi kwabanye abantu, singamalunga e-African Union, singamalunga e-United Nations. Bekungangcono yini ukuthi sihambe ku-United Nations sicele ingcitshi ezibona ngokuthunjwa kwabantu lokuhlukuluzwa kwabantu ukuthi babuye bazohluza lolu daba, ngoba abala hlangothi ababe belukhangele. Sikhangele even ku-African Union akhona ama-special rapporteurs. Besilakho ukuthi sibacele ukuthi buyani lizohluza lolu daba ukwenzela ukuthi lathi labo benelisa ukugeza izandla zabo. Abantu bamelele ukuthi kuphume sibekwazi ukuthi kuyini okwenzakalayo. Kodwa siqhubekela sibona ukuhlukuluzwa kwabantu okungapheliyo. Khathesi sibona abantu behanjiswa kumthethwandaba kuthiwe indaba sokumiswa kuthiwa iza kuba khona ngesinye isikhathi. Kwasimangalisa ukuthi kuthiwa uJohana Mamombe uyagula. Kulokuthi ahanjiswe esibhedlela kwathiwa akahanjiswe ejele. Angazi ukuthi ejele kulabodokotela yini. Mina ngake ngakuhlala ngaswela udokotela. Odokotela bagcina bebuya besuka ngaphandle kwejele. So angazi ukuthi udokotela kade ezamthola udokotela onjani. Ngoba lokhu kwenzakalayo sibona ingathi kuhlose ukuthi ngoba abantu laba bagcina besiyahlala labantu abaningi kuma-cell alungiselwa abantu abalutshwana. Okuyingozi ukuthi ingxenye bangagcina bebamba i-COVID-19. Izinto ezisikhathaze kakhulu ngalesi sikhathi. Bese ngikhangela njalo ukuphiwa kwabantu kokudla ngohulumende, ikakhulu ngohulumende. Lezinye izinto ezihambelana lokuthi abantu bathole inhlanyelo. Sibona kulo bandlululo olukhona. And abantu esibona behlupheka kakhulu ngomama ngoba yibo abafanele babekwazi ukuthi ngilokudla okwanelayo yini ukwenelisa ukuthi abantu abami basuthe. Thina esikudingayo ukuthi nxa kulezi zinto esifanele ziphiwe uZulu, kaziphiwe uZulu mgceke. Kungaze kwakhangela ukuthi umuntu ngowebandla liphi kumbe usuka ngaphi. Ngoba indaba eziphathelane lokuba lilunga lebandla lezombusazwe yinto lilungelo elikusekelo sombuso sethu. Siyakuvumela khona lokho. Okutsho ukuthi uhulumende ulomlando ukwenelisa ukuthi umuntu wonke oselizweni kufanele abe lethuba lokuthi amalungelo akhe ahlonitshwe, njalo akhuthazwe, njalo agcwaliswe. Okuyinto ebesingayiboni kakhulu ngo-2020.
Awube ngumnyaka onzima kakhulu. Ngakho-ke ungakahambi Justina, ungikhuthazo bani ongayitshiyela abesifazane omama lapho bedibane lohlupho lokuhlukunyezwa ngasezindlini, emsebenzini, ngasemhlanganisweni kumbe kumabandla ezombusazwe. Sikhangele i-COVID-19 yona leyo lamalungelo abo. Inkuthazo bani elingayipha?
Inkuthazo engingayinika omama yikuthi omama baningi elizweni leZimbabwe. Asisebenziseni ithuba lona lelo lokuthi sibaningi. Sibuthane njengabomama, singaze sakhangela ezombusazwe kodwa sibuthaniswe ngokuba ngomama, ngoba singekela ukuzilwela thina njengabomama. Akula muntu ozwehlule ukuthi adle isitshwala ngoba thina akekho umuntu osinakayo ukuthi sikhona. So ithuba likhona lokuthi omama sibambane, ngoba singakhangela ukuthi sibanenge okunganani. Nxa sifuna izikhundla zonke eziphezulu zingaba yizikhundla zabomama, singaqinisa ukuthi sibambane, ngoba ungahamba abantu besiya kuma-elections, uyabona ukuthi omama yibo ababe bebanengi kuma-line lapha belindele ukuthi bahambe bayovota. Kodwa udubo olukhona yilona lolo lokuthi kuyakuba lezinto eziphiwa omama yilabana abalemali ababe bekukhetho. Ubona ukuthi omama ababe bekukhetho kaningi imali leyo abalayo, ukuthi benelisa ukuthengela abantu ama-tennis, benelisa ukuthengela abantu amazambia, ekucineni kuvotelwa obaba ngoba balemali. Thina njengabomama singenelisa ukuthi sibambane, kungaba lo mahluko obakhona. Kodwa ngifuna ukuthi omama abaphathelane lo dlame ezindlini kumbe ababona udlakela olubaphathayo ngezombusazwe kumbe ukuncitshwa ukudla, sithi thina khulumani ngalezo ndubo elihlangana lazo, ngoba ungekela ukukhuluma uyacina ugula. Ngakho kufanele kwaziwe bakhona abangalincedisa,
abangakunceda, ngoba kube lesehlakalo somunye umama ogcine ebulala abantu bakhe abathathu kumbe ngabane, abane, yena esefuna lokuzibulala. Yikho-ke kuyabangela inhlupho zona lezo zokuthi abantu bayathatha imphefumulo yabo sebephelele. Yikho kusimele sikunanzelela. Hayi, mbongile kakhulu Justina, ngazo zonke izikhathi uba khona ukuthi usincedise ukuba sikhulule.
Thank you so much, my beautiful sister.
Yes, maybe
Thank
just
you.
give us your last word on how women, or what's your last word as you leave us on how women can cope during this COVID-19, especially when we look at their rights and looking at today being the International Human Rights Day.
I think what is important is for women to speak out about the violations that they are facing. It might be within the private sphere from the family. It might be within the community. It might be at any other level. They need to vocalize what they are going through. And it's important for women to identify with other women who are going through the same, because being in a support situation does help. It always helps to be able to, if anything is bottled inside, at the end of the day, it becomes dangerous and dangerous to the individual themselves.
Thank you, because I would have asked for you to say it in Shona, but I think now we are abusing you.
Okay, let me just do it.
Yes, please just tell us in Shona.
Zvakakosha kuti tigone kutaura nezvematambudziko atakatarisana nawo. Munharaunda dzatinogara mune vanhu vatinogona kutaura navo, asi ukaona zvakakuomera kutaura nevanhu ivavo, kune masangano akati wandei anogona kupa rubatsiro. Nekuti kuchengeta zviri mukati zvinoreva kuti pane imwe nguva zvinozogona kukukurira, nekuti munhu wemukati uyu munhu anoda kuchengetedzwa zvakanaka. Akaramba achitutirwa zvinhu zvinogona kuzoputika rimwe remazuva, tozoona amai vaita zvinhu zvavanozotarisa kuti nhai kunda ndapindwa nei. Iye zvinezvi tiri kunzwa nyaya dzaana amai vari kuuraya vana vavo. Handifungi kuti kuda kuti munhu anenge ari kuda kuuraya vana, asi anenge apinda mumadzudzo akawanda anopedzisira aita kuti azoita zvisina kutombofungidzirwa kuti munhu anogona kuita kumhuri yake. Saka chero iri mhirizhonga iri mumba, ngatitaurei nezvayo. mirizhonga iri munharaunda dzatiri ngatitaurei nezvayo. Ukaona wanyimwa zvekudya nezvimwe zvinenge zvichipiwa vamwe, taura nezvazvo, nekuti kupiwa kwekudya pane mastandards anoteedzerwa. Mastandards ayo anotaura kuti zvematongerwo enyika hazvifanire kunge zviri kupinda pakugoverwa kwezvinhu kuvanhu. Kana pane zvinhu zviri kunzi zviri kupiwa vese vanonzi vanoshaya, ngatiregei kuita rusarura nenyaya dzematongerwo enyika, nekuti kupinda mumatongerwo enyika ikodzero yemunhu wese wemuZimbabwe. Zvese izvi zvine chekuita nekodzero zvirimo muchapter 4 yeconstitution yedu.
Aiwa, mabva mavharisa masports ese tinokutendai uyezve nguva yedu ndofunga yamatipa yakwana. Tinokutendai chaizvo, tosangana zvakare mune zvimwe zvirongwa.
Thank you very much.
Aiwa, apo tanga tiri kuzwa kubva kuna muzvare Justina Mukoko vanga vari kutaurawo pamusoro pezvatu zviri kusanganikwa nemadzimai, uyezve tisingakanganwe tinoziva muzvare Dondo mambomira nekuti muzvare Mukoko vanga vari kumhanyiswa nenguva, asi tipeiwo zvamuri kuona zviri kusangana nemadzimai panguva iyo tiri kuona kupera kwe16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence, uyezve tichiona kuti zuva ranhasi izuva rekodzero dzevanhu vese re-International Human Rights Day.
Zvataura muzvare Mukoko zvekuti inofanira kuita 365 days of activism, nekuti zuva rega rega pane mudzimai ari kushungurudzwa. Ichi chinhu chandofunga kuti chatinofanira kuramba tichitoita senyika and also sema non-profit organizations. Zvandiri kunyosangana nazvo zvichiitika mukati meupenyu hwemadzimai, rega nditaure ndichiti madzimai akazvarirwa kuZimbabwe ari kumanikidzwa nemamiriro akaita zvinhu kumusha kuti vaende kunyika dzakasiyana pasi rose. Pane vamwe vari kusangana nematambudziko akasiyana siyana, kusanganisira mabatirwo avari kuitwa kwavari kushanda. Vamwe vachona vanoudzwa kunzi vanonoshanda kwavanoshanda vanopiwa mari yakati, asi kana vasvika ikoko mabasa acho akasiyana vanopiwa, yatinoti sex trafficking or yatinoti human trafficking. Nekuda kwemamiriro akaita zvinhu kumusha, vanasikana vazhinji vari kupedzisira vapinda mumatambudziko, vozotifonera. Tinotambira mafone calls kubva kunyika dzakaita sana Turkey, Dubai, nyika dzakasiyana siyana. Izvi zvinhu zviri kuitika munharaunda yedu zvanofanira kuramba tichitarisa. Organization yedu yakatangirwa zvayo kuAmerica, asi vanhu vatiri kushanda navo vanasikana nemadzimai ekuZimbabwe vari pasi rose. Kutaura kuno kuti nemaclients kuna South Africa, Cape Town, Johannesburg, vanotibata ipo paFacebook. Saka munhukadzi zvambotaurwa namuzvare Mukoko, munhukadzi wemuZimbabwe panguva inoi vari kutarisana nematambudziko akanyanya kuwandisa. Vanoti ivo muchirungu, whenever a nation is in distress, the woman and the girl child suffers the most. And also zvimwe zvatiri kuona zviri kusanganisa nevanasikana vedu ndezvekuti vari kupedzisira vatadza kupedza chikoro, vamwe vopedzisira vakumanikidzwa kuroorwa, vari kupedzisira vaenda mumatambudziko ekuti mamwe achona havafanonge vachiwira imomo, asi nekushayiwa dzimwe nzira dzekurarama nadzo vari kupedzisira vaipapo. Saka ndo zvinhu zvatiri kunyanya kuona mumabasa edu atiri kuita iwaya kubatsira madzimai nevasikana.
Chii chakaita kuti mufunge kutanga sangano renyu iri? Tinoona rinonzi Pumulani, zvinorevei?
Pumulani izulu, izwi rechiZulu, rinoreva kuti munhu anoda rugare, lover of peace. Izita rakapiwa mwanasikana wangu, izita rake repari pakati, middle name yemwanasikana wangu. Chakada ndipe organization yostyle ndechekuti ndaida kuva nemufananidzo wekuzvirangaridza kuti basa randiri kuita harisi basa rekungoita nekungoti ndinoda kungoita basa, asi basa rekuita rekuti ndinoda kuporesa nyika yangu yeZimbabwe. Ndichitanga nekuporesa mhuri yekwedu, ndichitanga nekuporesa mwanasikana wangu, kumeka sure kuti mwanasikana wangu haafi akawira nematambudziko akawirwa namai vangu kana andakawirwa nawo semunhu wemukadzi. Saka pese patinobatsira vanhu vevakadzi, kugaroora indangariro inogara iri musoro mangu kufunga kuti munhu wemukadzi wandiri kubatsira uyu, mwanasikana wandiri kubatsira uyu mwana wangu, ndisisi vangu, ndio kuZimbabwe, ndo mashandiro atinoita iwayo, kwete kungoita basa nje nekuti asi kunyasa basa kuti kuita basa kuti ubatsire mhuri yako yose. Ndo matangiro achakaita iwayo.
PJ, tiri kuenderera mberi zvedu nechirongwa chedu chatinacho ichochi. Tanga tiri kutarisa isu dingindira regore rino re16 Days of Activism. Tinoziva kuti zvizhinji zvanga zviri kuitika pane panguva iyo ino zvakare yeInternational Human Rights Day. Tinoona kuti ndo nguva yairangarirwa vanhu vakaita savana Patson Zamara, vamwe vakawanikwa ivo vachitsakatika, uyezve not Patson, Itai Dzamara sorry, Itai Dzamara akawanikwa iye achitsakatika, uyezve sekutaura kwamboita sisi Justina Mukoko vanga vari kutaura ivo kuti vari kurangarira zvakare kutorwa nechisimba kuri kuitwa vanhu muZimbabwe, zvisingazozikanwa kuti zviri kufamba sei, tozoona vachimiswa mumatare nezvimwe zvakadaro. Asi pari zvino rega timboona pane imwe vhidhiyo yamanga mauya nayo CCPJ yanga iri kutaura iyo zviri kusanganika nemadzimai panyaya ye16 Days of Activism against the gender-based violence. Tichiona zvakare kuti pane mamwe masangano ari kushandawo munyika vachipa vanhu chikafu nezvimwe zvakadaro, saka tichange tiri kukupai zvakare zviri kubuda kubva kumasangano iwayo panyaya yekupa vanhu chikafu nezvimwe zvakadaro. But pari zvino regai timboenda tichiona kuti mamwe masangano anga ari kuita zvipi panguva ino ye16 Days of Activism against the gender-based violence.
The occasion yetu was a jazz night in commemoration of the 16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence, held at Jazz Cafe, mhlaka 28 November. The main objective was bringing together different players, different actors, and different organizations. This included the councillor and other CSOs, including in media as well, to try and help us to speak from one voice, but also amplifying our voices, our young women in art, ukuthi bakhulume a little bit louder. It was organized by Youth for Innovation Trust and the Loziba Festival Movement. In attendance was Councillor Skumoyo Oyepumula. We also had Treat, we had Vovo, we had other young leaders in communities. It was mainly to just try and make sure that we use and amplify young women in arts work. So in performance, we had artists Nomvula, Ntombiolwandle, uQeqeshiwe Mtambo, Pamela Magariro, Uchichi, Rachel Voko, Lo Spoiler Tamara. You are at the main performing artists during the event.
Ibizo lami nginguthando Gwinji, ngimelele inhlanganiso ye-Youth for Innovation Trust, and sihlangane lamuhla sicommemorate i-16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence. Khanyele ukuthi abasifazana bengahlukunyezwa ngendlela eziningi ezishiyeneyo, and sithi sikwenza lokho sihlangane lama-partners amaningi, ama-partners esibona ukuthi kufanele ukuthi sisebenzisane ukuze siqede lolu hlupho esibhekene lalo njenge-community.
Mina ibizo lami nguRachel Voko Ncube, ngimelele iLoziba Movement. iLoziba Movement, it's a movement elama-female artists in Bulawayo. So today we are commemorating 16 Days of Activism. We are trying by all means ukuthi abesifazana bengahlukunyezeki. So the reason why we decided ukusebenzisa iLoziba Movement to commemorate this day is because sibonile ukuthi ama-artists ale voice powerful, capable of convincing the society, capable of influencing the society for a positive change.
Mina ibizo lami ngiwandile Dliwayo, ngivela eTreat, which is Trans Research Education Advocacy and Training. Thina njengeTreat, we mainly work with transgender people, and we are fighting the stigma and discrimination against transgender people. In this 16 Days of Activism, we want to fight against violence among transgender identities. Ngoba njengama-transgender in a community like Zimbabwe, sihlezi sihlukumezeke kakhulu.
Salibonani, ibizo lami nguMiles Moyo, ngisebenzela inhlanganiso okuthiwa yi-Voice of the Voiceless. Sisebenza with LBQT persons in Bulawayo. Namhla sihlangane lamanye ama-organization ukuthi si-commemorate i-16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Kuyisikhathi esiqakathekileyo ukuthi sikhulume kakhulu ngamalungelo ama-communities that are marginalized. So thina njengenhlanganiso sibone kuqakathekile ukuthi sikhulumele abafazi njalo labantu esingathi ngama-sexual and gender minorities ababandlululwa kakhulu eZimbabwe kodwa bengela ma-platforms ukuthi bakhankasele amalungelo abo.
Aiwapo tanga tiri kunzwa mazwi evamwe vari kuita zvirongwa zvekurangarira nyaya iyi ye16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Tinoona zvakare kuti panguva iyo ino pane mamwe masangano ari kubatsira madzimai nevamwe vari kugara mumadhorobha panyaya yechikafu, nekuti nyaya yechikafu ndo iri kunyanyonetsa vazhinji. Tiri kuona nezuro sangano reWFP rakawanikwa iro richiwanikwa richibatsira vamwe madzimai vanobva ivo kumasvingo panyaya yechikafu. Regai tinzwe kuti zvii zvanga zviri kuitika ikoko.
Tatenga mafuta, shuga neraisi.
Matenga mishandisa chirongwa chiri kubatsira isi mukurarama kwenyu especially tiri munguva yeCovid.
Chotibatsira musaka kuti takagona kurarama nekuda kwekufukidza kwokuti vazhinji vedu vamwe taita zvekutengesa saka tisingachakwanisi kutengesa kwataita nenyaya yeCovid kuti muite mutaundi kumahodha kana kuti muti tatisingachakwanisi kuhodha nenyaya yekuti kwanzi kune korona. Saka takakwanisa kurarama kubudikidza nechirongwa chakatikwanisa kutiwanisawo chikafu tikwanisewo kudya tichiguta. Saka tozvotongotendawo Mwari kuti vakatirangarira, tichitendawo kunyangwe nemiwo.
Aiwa, apo tiri kunzwa kubva kune mamwe madzimai vari kumasvingo vanga vari kutaura ivo pamusoro pechirongwa chesangano reWFP World Food Program chiri kubatsira mumadhorobha nyanya panyaya yekupa vanhu mari yekuti vatenge chikafu. Regai tinzwe kumutungamiri wesangano irori reWFP vachitaura pamusoro pechirongwa ichi vari kumasvingo.
Briefly tell me how many people are, when did your program start, and how many people are benefiting in the country?
So WFP's Urban Social Assistance and Resilience Building Programme started at the end of 2019, where we did the pilot in Epworth in Harare. Then in January 2020, we started to rapidly scale up the programme across the country. And then when the COVID-19 pandemic hit Zimbabwe, we knew how much people were really struggling to put food on the table with their income sources being taken away. And so we've been scaling up ever since then, and right now we're delivering to 327,000 people across Zimbabwe, and we know that people really need this urgent food assistance right now, which we deliver in the form of cash transfers through an e-voucher and through a remittance-based service as well. And we know how much families are being able to be more food insecure and to face some stability and peace right now thanks to the food that they're getting.
Aiwa, apo tiri kunzwa isu mutungamiri wesangano reWorld Food Program vachitaura ivo pamusoro pezvimwe zvirongwa zvavari kuita munzvimbo yemasvingo zviri kubatsira madzimai uyezve nevarume panguva iyo vazhinji vari kutarisana nekushayika kwechikafu. Taona apo vari kutaura ivo kuti vari kupa vanhu mari inenge yakaiswa pakadhi kuitira kuti vanhu nyanya madzimai vaende vachinotenga chikafu chekuti vawanikwe ivo vachiwana raramo panguva ino yeCovid-19. PJ.
Lapho-ke siqale sezwa abesifazane benhlanganiso ezehlukeneyo ababe lo mkhosi wokunanza i-16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Bekhuluma ngabakwenzileyo emkhankasweni wona lowo. Kodwa-ke lizananzelela ukubana unkosazana Justina Mkoko esike sakhuluma laye ekuqaliseni kohlelo uthe yena kakungananzwa ukulondolozwa kwelungelo labesifazane kunsuku zona lezi ezili-16 kuphela ezi-16 days, kodwa-ke kakunanzwe umnyaka wonke ngoba kulabanye abazaba lemicabango yokuthi njobana i-16 days lezi seziphelile sesizigqibile sokulithuba elihle lokuthi ngiqhubekele phambili ngokuhlukumeza kumbe siqalise ukukuhlukumeza ngoba kunanzwa kuphela ngansuku zona lezo ezili-16. Sazoba njalo labancediswa luhlelo olo-World Food Program lokubaphathisa ngokudla, ngokubanika abasazanga lonyaka abe-WFP kabasayanga kwabela ukudla endaweni ezitshiyeneyo zelizwe kungenxa yobhubhane lolu olwe-COVID-19. Ngakho-ke baphume lecebo lokupha abantu okungamakhadi ngokuyathenga lokho kudla ezitolo ezithile. KoBulawayo kwaba luhlelo olwaluthengwa ko-Hyper, ko-OK lakwesinye isitolo esengisilibele ibizo laso. Kodwa-ke kwenzakala lokho abe-WFP bahle bapha abantu bangikhona abakumele bathole lolo ncedo. Engxenye njalo besesabela ukubana kungangena emahofisini abohulumende kuzacina kusiba lenkethabetshabe. Njengobana simzwile uJustina ekhuluma lapha uthi yena kube lenkethabetshabe ekwabelweni kokudla obekulethwa nguhulumende. Kwaba njalo lenkethabetshabe ekwabelweni kwenhlanyelo lemvundiso yama-fertilizer phansi kohlelo ole-Command Agriculture kumbe olweGatshombo. Yikho-ke ukuzama ukuthi kwenqabelwe yonke inkohlakalo eyenzakalayo ngoba inkohlakalo yilo udubo olukhulu lokwephulwa kwamalungelo abantu eZimbabwe, kutsho abenhlanganiso ezimele kumbe ezigqugquzela ukulondolozwa kwamalungelo abantu kweleZimbabwe. Besithi inkohlakalo yiyo ephambanise isimo somnotho welizwe, yiyo ephambanise ukulondolozwa kwelungelo labantu, yiyo ephambanise konke nje okwenzakala eZimbabwe kube kungenxa yenkohlakalo lenkethabetshabe, ngokuthi abantu bekhangelana ngokuthi ngabe bandla liphi elezombusazwe ukuze uthole uncedo phansi kweziqondiso ze-COVID-19 lockdown, phansi kwezinye iziqondiso zokuthi abantu bancedwe bathole indingeko zabo zonke. Kulilungelo labo lokuthi bathole izinto ezinjengamanzi. Lilungelo lomuntu wonke ukuthi athole amanzi kalula njalo ahlanzekileyo. Kodwa-ke lube ludubo olukhulu eZimbabwe, ikakhulu ngasemhlubulweni weMandebeleni koBulawayo, lapho kucine kuqhamuka khona umkhuhlane owesihudo ngoba abantu benathe kumbe besebenzise amanzi ukupheka angcolileyo abehlangene lalawo abephuma ezambuzini. Yikho kuke kwaba ludubo sibili wasabalala lowo mkhuhlane wesihudo emzini weLuveve lasemzini ehanqe iLuveve waze wafika la kubophumula laseNkulumane. Udubo lwamanzi lolu.
Time is not on our side, PJ, but maybe before we go, let's just give an update on the COVID cases currently in Zimbabwe. According to the Minister of Health, we have 11,007 recorded cases of COVID-19 in Zimbabwe with 9,147 recoveries. And currently, those living with COVID-19 active cases are 1,556. And currently we have 304 deaths. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank Justina Mukoko, the director of Zimbabwe Peace Project, who came here, and also Comfort Dondo, the director of Pumulani, based here in Minnesota in the United States. But she is also working with women back home in Zimbabwe and young girls to stop gender-based violence and other issues affecting women. But as I say, time is not on our side, so we don't have any extra time like in soccer, PJ, so we have to call it a day. I'm Marvelous Mpanganyahuye in Washington.
And I'm Praxedis Jeremiah, and City Libele Langa Elihle, Libelo Butongo Buhle, Astibaneni ngeviki ezayo.
And just to remind you that this is a pre-recorded program, so by the time you hear some of our figures, some of the figures may have changed.
May have changed.
Yes. Have a very good evening. Bye-bye.